Thank you. The applause is comforting, but I'm still nervous as hell. Because I've never done something like this, so I guess the best way to go about it is just to begin. Talking about what I do, why I do, and telling other people the ideas that I have to help them do what I do. So let's begin talking about the city that I'm obsessed with, the city of Manila. As you know, the Philippines was pretty much outsourced by Spain to Mexico, so we never really had pretty much a flag. So our defining force, actually, or our defining symbol was this seal that you see right here. And it's a very familiar seal to some people because it's also the seal of the presidency of the Philippines. It still maintains itself as a symbol of Philippine leadership. You probably recognize it most as being the seal of San Miguel Pier. But I also like being by tours and talking to people about how Manila got its name. Because Manila comes from two Tagalog words, Maynilad, which roughly translates into English as there are small shrubs that with white staked flowers that grow by the Pasig River. Or Maynilad. Right? Because May means that there are, and the Nilad means there are small shrubs with white star-shaped flowers that grow by the Pasig River. But it's actually really easy to tell the origin or the history of Philippine place if you just listen to the name. Because if you see that the name is in a local vernacular, which is based in Malay, Chinese, Arabic, things like Maynilad, or It's So Itchy, which means Makati, or places like It's So Dark, Diliman, or Oh, It's So Small, Muntinlupa, or It's So Short, Pandacan. These places are known to probably named before the coming of the Spanish. And then the Spanish come along and they bring Catholicism. God bless their souls. And so because of the Catholicism of the Philippines, we have places with names like Santa Ana, Santa Elena, Santa Isidro, Santa Isabel, Santa Luciana, Santiago, Santiago, Santa and Intramuros, which is Latin, which is the base of all Spanish. And then if you know your Philippine history well, you know that during the 20th century, you got the Americans coming over. And so now because of that, we have places with names like Forks Park, McKinley Road, Cattle Avenue, Jones Bridge, Beverly Hills. We have a Marlboro country, and we even have our own New York in Cubao. So you can see that just by understanding the names of the places, looking through what you see and hear, you can understand the history of a place. But where does that history of Manila begin for me? Why am I so obsessed with this story? Well, when a syphilitic king named King Felipe sent over a man named Miguel Lopez de Legazpi to an island called Luzon in the Pacific. They eradicated the Muslim population there and they built this little city that you see here, known as Intramuros, the beginning of all of Manila. And if you notice, the walls of Intramuros during the Spanish colonial period are very different from the walls of Intramuros today, because originally Intramuros was actually made out of bamboo. Because bamboo architecture is really the only Filipino architecture. If a building is made out of something else in the Philippines, it was probably built by a colonizer, like a church. But also, since we're a volcanic island, there's really nothing permanent to build within Manila. Because most of the buildings that you see here built in the Spanish colonial period are done out of volcanic ash. Right? So really you're looking at a city that's denied its own purpose. Like Manila really was not supposed to exist, but we insisted upon it existing. Right? And then you can see this architecture, which is a mixture of temporal and permanent, organic and inorganic, and east and west in the original architecture of Manila. So you're actually looking at, since our position is right next to Spain, was right next to China, but we're also a colony of Spain, you're looking at Chinese technology. Variations of hotong houses made out of volcanic ash capped with seashells and hardwood. So it's an organic and inorganic city. A little bit of the east trying to be west. And the reason why I said is because of trade. The Chinese coming to Manila to trade porcelain and silks and spices to the Spaniards. And you can even see the mix of east and west in the people. This is the typical Manila found in the 19th century. And they describe themselves as una familia mestiza española, a Spanish mestizo family. But who looks Spanish in that picture? It's clearly only the chair. And they're not entirely Chinese. Look at the big brother. Is that Spanish big brother, Chinese big brother, or Malay big brother? You tell me. It's a real halo-halo, a real mix is what we like to call it. But the true soul of the city lies, and it's in Intramuros. A city of 7 Spanish churches built out of volcanic ash. And this has always been our defining force, but also at the same time kind of the albatross that we have to bear. These 7 churches colonized the islands, gave us our first permanent institutions, and our first system of government that didn't have to do with bamboo and spears. And I'd like to call that system as that of the Catholic Taliban. of the 19th century. And even a national hero, Jose Rizal, came up with a name for that guy called Damaso, which is a character in one of his novels that talks about the abusive priest that tries to control society through his actions. And then when Americans come in the 20th century, all of a sudden things take a twist. All of a sudden things aren't going east looking west, but now west looking east. And Manila became the trading port of American goods coming to be sold in China. And the city blew up. The city went from that little riverside city there to the mouth of the Pasig River, spreading out into a sprawl that you see right here. But also with that came the Americanization of that society. So now you can see this eastern houses with a western twist, now splattered with Clark's ice cream, costing 2 cents. And we have things what I call Manila pasta, which are the electric wires and telephone wires. But as I said, it's a result of trade. And we're always caught between the east and west when it came to that trade. And you can see now new ideas coming in and new technologies. All of a sudden, those Spanish hotels were being torn down, and you see Art Deco buildings made with this new technology called concrete, Otis elevators, and air conditioning. And the Americans also brought in the precursor to our jeepney, the automobile, and new styles of architecture. California missionary architecture. So now our houses in Ross Boulevard in Manila started looking a little bit like Hollywood. But most importantly, the Americans brought over institutions above and beyond the Catholic Church. So they now, instead of the church coming up to you and getting money from you to create the social services, it was now your congressman and your president coming up to you to take your money to create the social services. Okay? And these institutions also included the education system. Because now the coming of the Americans and teaching us English, no longer did you have to be part of the Spanish, Chinese, landed elites to rise up in society. But now you can be a regular person, and you can be able to rise up and become the president of the Philippines no matter what skin color you were. And this was liberating, especially for the Filipino woman, who actually got to vote even ahead of the American woman. And as you can clearly see, no longer does a Filipino have to wear the 20 kilos of cloth, but now she only has to wear 8 kilos of cloth. Right? And the city kept expanding, but maintained its personality of being east and west, old and new, organic and inorganic. Well, one of the main reasons also why we were colonized by the United States and Spain was for military use. And that's really where Manila took its turn. Because of our use with the United States militarily, when a man named General Douglas MacArthur came to Manila to liberate us from a man named General Yamashita, they completely obliterated the city. And there's that walled city with an American tank going right through it in February of 1945. So that beautiful city of east and west, organic and inorganic, a transition between old and new, now lay in ruin. And this is the part of the story that obsesses me, because this is really where I think Manila took a turn at which it never recovered. Here's Manila in 1945. Manila today. Manila 1945. Manila 1945. And Manila today. And this is a story that's not known to many people. It was not even known to myself, and is still very unknown to many Filipinos. We have been purposely taught, or we've been purposely untaught our history, I guess kind of like a survival mechanism. But after the war, we tried bringing it all back. When American funding came back in, we built our institutions, we rebuilt the government, we rebuilt the commercial districts of Manila. But without the 7 Spanish churches of Intramuros, the spiritual relevance of that city was now gone. So everybody started moving out of Manila, going down to places like Makati, places like Quezon City, and they brought in a new idea to protect them from all the harm, which is called the gated community. So now the old Intramuros is now replaced by the new Intramuroses of Dasmariñas Village, Forbes Park, Magallanes, and all the gated cities that you see. And you probably know where some of your friends live there today. And that is basically the base of the city. And even the attempts of a crazy woman named Imelda Marcos, who came to the city and tried to stamp her own ideas upon it by creating her own Lincoln Centers, our own MRTs, the most technologically advanced airport in Asia for 1981. And especially building a road called EDSA to unify the city, a road that eventually became her downfall, is the city that we see today. That is the Manila that you probably all know and probably have visited. A city that isn't easy to understand, a city that isn't easy to love, but a city that is very easy to judge. And so what I do is that I try to change people because I still see parts of the city. If you just look deep through Manila, you'll still see that the past is still there. The soul is still there waiting to be brought out once again. And that's what I try to do with my tours. I try to bring it all back, if not only for anybody, but even just for myself. But how did I start doing that? As a spoiled upper middle class kid growing up in one of those gated communities, I had no idea what it was. Absolutely no idea. I thought everyone in the world is Catholic. I thought everyone in the world spoke English. But once I graduated, went to college at Place School University of the Philippines, a very leftist school. I met my first communists. I went to my first anti-government rally. I met my first lesbians. I became a political cartoonist for a local newspaper when I was in college. And that got me a job working as an illustrator and eventually got me into the Rhode Island School of Design. And so at the Rhode Island School of Design, I became a painter and realized by the third year I was allergic to paint. So instead of having to make my dad pay for one extra year of tuition, I decided to go into performance art. So I now use my skills in drawing to create these little stories of Manila's past, sometimes fake, in little areas. Oh, you can totally make up your own history. It's perfectly legitimate. Every nation does it. Please. And I brought it with me to the States. And after graduating from Rhode Island School of Design with honors for the performance art that in performance art, I moved to New York, worked with Socrates Sculpture Park in Queens, also with Bill T. Jones' Arnie Zane Dance Company, and a bunch of guys called Blue Man Group, which I'm sure some of you have heard. And they taught me about theater can actually be a tourist attraction, that actually theater can be done in the city to tell a story. And so I brought that theory to Manila. And so now Manila became my stage, the tourists are my audience, and this is a typical group of me leading people through historical parts of Manila, telling the story that I know. And I have two stories, one which is Intramuros, which is the Spanish period, and then the Cold War story, which is Living La Vida Imelda, talking about the Philippines in the 1970s. So it's like a disco journey through Philippine history. But that has given me some sort of extraneous fame, and I've been using it. I now am one of the faces for Philippine tourism when it comes to our Department of Tourism's campaign. I use it to protest. I've become an activist because of my actions in Intramuros, whether it be for fighting for women's reproductive rights, for the RH bill, fighting for LGBT rights. My wife loves this picture. I've become a spokesperson for Durex condoms. And to thank Intramuros for what I do every year, I give a free tour every February, the day the Manila was destroyed. I give a free tour for 200 people and we reduce spirit movements in the air, just so people don't forget of the city that once was and the grand city that it could be. And my last action I did in the city actually was this, Damaso, protesting against Catholic Church interference in Philippine politics. And because of that, I was put in jail. And I'm still under trial until today. And I could go to jail for 6 years for blasphemy. But my lawyer says I'm okay. But from going through that, this is what I learned and what I'm trying to tell local government units of what I did to Intramuros you could probably do in your own little small town. So, from that cheesy book, Eat, Pray, Love, I tell them that what you have to develop in your city are 3 things. Eat, pray, and live. And what I mean by eat, I don't mean just food. Okay, food is very important because the food shows what a society is sustained upon. If you have too much junk food in your little town in the Philippines, it says a lot about the way what your little town thinks about, right? If you have too much MSG in your food, it's a judgment call on the way that the people think. So and you also have to take into consideration whether it be from regular food that you get in the mall or a hotel food or even food that you get in the streets. It always has to be tied into the society. Like, if you don't have chocolate growing naturally in your region, what's the point of having it all imported, trying to create a signature food for your town? You're better off being authentic. Make the best adobo that you can in your town than trying to make a spaghetti that a tourist will throw up when he tries it. Because, you know, adobo and spaghetti, sometimes, wait a minute, actually maybe adobo and spaghetti would work.